Had two daughters, Julia and Dorothy, and they lived there. And then one of them married Grady Fry, and we built the house behind him and moved out there. And then the other daughter was my third grade school teacher. The first grade school teacher was supposed to be Georgia White, but she moved to Fort Worth, so I had Roberta Rigsby first grade. The second grade school teacher was Belinda Yates on the far end of the next block. The third grade school teacher was the first house on this side. And the third grade was Dorothy Pike. And the fourth grade teacher was Ella Mallison, the first house on the right side off the Pine Bluff. That's a good foundation. He's like kept with this. That's pretty cat. I hadn't seen it. That's a new one. And these trees here, in 1916 fire, all of Fitzhugh burned, and these trees burned to the ground. And the next day, Mr. Kill that lives here got his colored boys to come out, and they sawed those off at the ground. And these three trees came up as two sprouts. And he twisted them together like this. He thought that would make them a stronger tree. And you see that goes up to two trees and divides up here. And it's got 2 points to each one of them. But all the rest of these trees, to get down to the last house over here, those big trees down there where the car lights are, that was Dan Simpson lived there. And those trees did not burn in the parish fire. The ones across the street from there to the Sharp place, which is the Atkinson's big mansions is down there, those did not burn. But all these other trees, except these three here, were planted after the parish fire. To show you how.
Where do you think the fire stopped down here? Do you have any idea?
It burned all the way down to the end of the street.
Okay, down there about where that white
And then the wind changed and came from the north and blew it back across town. It started down by the compress house, where the cotton compress, where the city jail is now. Came across town and burned this end, and it was March the 21st, 1916. And the wind changed, and it came back and burned a path back here, and left the center area. And when it got to the south side, the wind changed again, and came back and burned the middle section. And those people, some of them moved the furniture out 3 times to keep from burning, moved it back in, and the wind changed and came back and burned all the furniture up. And Mutt Cross, he was right around the corner here. He was the last living fireman that fought in the parish fire. He was just a boy, but a big boy. He looked as old man. And he fought in the parish fire. And East Texas recorded the eyewitness account of the parish fire. Mutt told it. He was a postman, and then he was a tall fireman all his life. And then when they built Camp Maxie, he was fire chief out there. Still social, what do you call it? Whatever government workers like post office.
Civil service.
Civil service. So he didn't lose any of his retirement or anything. He was fire chief out there, and then he came back and he was my first postman when he moved down to First National Bank. And he told all about this, and he was lost, and they thought him to be burned because he didn't show up in an hour and a half. And about 2 hours, he coming in, trucking in. And he got trapped in a firing area. He laid down by a high gutter with his heavy coat on and punched his knife and punched holes in the fire hose there and sprayed mist over him, and the smoke was so thick he couldn't stand up because he couldn't breathe, and laid there for an hour and a half or so. And the fire burned out, and when it cleared out, then he came back in, and they stopped fighting the fire and said, "Hip, hip, hooray!" for Mutt. And all of them thought he was the youngest one and thought he had burned to death. So that was a real interesting tale there. And it was a March day, and the wind changed, I said, several times, and it burnt the whole town. But it didn't burn either one, didn't burn the sanitarium parish or the St. Joseph Hospital. Now, Mr. Kill lived here, and then later on, his granddaughter, Grady Fry, exchanged with the older Georgian family, the little house for the bigger house. And so Grady Fry, the undertaker, was Fry Gibbs.
This was citizens.
And Bill and Charles and Julianne. Julianne lives here now by herself, and she's the youngest daughter of that family. And her sister lived right behind Dorothy, who's married to Paul River. And she lived behind there. And at one time, Mr. McDonald lived here on the corner, and he was kin to the president of the First National Bank, one of the McDonalds, and he had a carnival, a traveling carnival. So he had all the ride equipment for all the little fairs and stuff around. And he made a lot of money. Took a lot of money from all the little towns. That was dimes and quarters back in those days. And then later on, who lived there?
Bob Swain.
Bob Swain, George Wall.
Or just across the street?
Right across here.
Well, the Deshawns lived there a long time.
You're way down the line. We're way back.
Oh, you're way back. Okay.
You're way back. They all lived here first, and then finally Lord Deshawn bought it then, and he was a Chevrolet and the Cadillac dealer. And then when the Ford agency built the big red house over here, Mr. Alden, when he died, and then John bought his house. He just getting started here and said that this is now a Chevrolet Cadillac and not Ford Lincoln. And Ross Olive was a Buick dealer, and he lived down in Mexico.
Yeah.
And Blake Moore lived here.
Well, I had an
The
aunt
boys
that
club,
lived
no.
next door to the
Bankhead.
Bankhead.
Yeah, his bankhead was Dr. O'Neill's sister. She had, what, 2 or 4 girls?
Vernon Bankhead was the brother of Mrs. O'Neill.
Mrs. O'Neill. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sister-in-law, Dr. O'Neill.
Vernon Bankhead married Zoe Nickel, who was my father's sister.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I stand corrected.
Yes.
First mistake I made.
But I grew up in her house.
And that sweet girls, and of course, really went on. She got real high in what? Was she in the Navy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
She was in the Navy 2 years before Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, she went on up, right on
When
up
she
to
died
that.
in her 70s, she was buried at sea. She loved the Navy.
Yeah. And that's some real sweet girls. And they lived in the second house here. And they bought it from Mr. Hogue that lived there.
Yeah.
And he built the Boone Richards house, or the house next door to that. Then later on, Hunt's Dry Goods came to Paris, and one of the Hunt brothers ran this one, and Henry Ayers was the assistant manager. And after a few years, it got going so good, Ayers bought him out and became Ayers Dry Goods. And so recently, and Billy Mackey, his son, took it over after Mr. Ayers died. And Mr. Hogue built the house where Boone Richards lived, and then after Mr. Hogue, I forgot who owned it next, but Henry Ayers moved there, and his beautiful daughters lived up the street.
Okay, so I went to school with Becky, the Fries, all these people around here.
He was good company.
That's right.
A good company.
You said the McDonald's, the Observatory McDonald family was in that one?
No,
Or
they were related.
related to him.
But the
What were their names?
Max, I don't know his first name, but he had a big
You said he ran a carnival?
carnival. I had all the rides there.
Okay.
He brought money in
Okay.
the bank.
Okay.
And then later on, it changed hands several times. Bedford had it, and Lord Deshawn had it, and there, and George Wall had one down. George's son built this little house here, and his wife ran Williams 40 years way back when Mr. Williams was there. She was a good businesswoman too. And of course, Mr. McDonald, the president of the First National Bank, was the one that gave McDonald Observatory, you know.
Yeah.
He was very interested in astronomy and all of that. Now, while we're here and you can sit good, this house was owned by the Hudsons. And they had a bunch of girls, and one of them married Mr. Clark, who was president of Roger Wade's lumber furniture store. And when I was a little boy, they sent a lot of their fine furniture to South America, shipped it by boat to South America. Beautiful dining room suites and real fine furniture. And the Chamber of Commerce honored us a while back, and they were the oldest consecutive members of the Chamber of Commerce. And my dad and the Hunt Clinics were, I think, the second oldest Chamber of Commerce members through the years during that time. That was several years ago.
Dr. Hunt, this is not a good question. When did your dad move on to Fitzhugh?
About 1921, 22. He lived across from Judge Moore. And Dr. Cook lived next door, and Dr. Lenore across the street, and Dr. O'Neill down the street. Behind him were Dr. Lewis and Dr. Gilmore, and Dr. Jones was on East Price and 8 now. And Dr. Cook, Dr. Goolsby were across the street, the 3rd and 4th house here. Dr. Cook was veterinary, and Dr. Goolsby was a good surgeon, general practitioner. There were a lot of babies. Had a daughter that was a teacher out at junior college, Christine Goolsby, and she married Mr. Deshawn when his first wife passed away several years later. They've been neighbors all these many years. And where Mr. Hogue lived, well then the heirs lived there. And the owner operator of the heirs department store, and the daughter had the Hunts over at Bonham until not too many, just a few years ago. There was a Hunts department store over there. The Hunts were real nice people too. And one of the Hunts that owned the store moved in the block down the street from where we lived when they were here. And where we live there now, later on, A.G. Mays, when he came first to Paris, he and his lovely wife was redheaded, and the 2 redheaded girls, they were about senior in high school, and maybe one was in college then. All of them, both girls, played beautiful. They sold over on the piano.
Did they live here on Fitzhugh?
Yeah. They lived. A.G. Mays lived where I live now. It was a wooden house that Dorothy Ribble Pike's daddy built that after the Paris fire, and Mr. Keel and his family moved into it until they built the big house up here on the corner. A lot of history going back. And then the Lone Star gas man lived here at one time, Boone Richards. And then the TP&L president lived down the Alexander House in the next block down the street. We'll get to after a while.
Who lived in that house
There,
there?
Mrs. Yates lived there, and Miss Linda Yates was my 2nd grade school teacher.
Yeah, I know.
Wonderful person. And they didn't kill him and get prosecuted and took the hall off.
Is that still in her family?
No, the city manager owns it.
City manager.
Can't get him to mow the yard.
Oh!
If anybody had to pull with the city, I wish you could get him to mow the yard. And Mrs. Yates was the sister of Hugh Tennant's wife that lived on this corner here.
Okay.
And Hugh Tennant had a big grocery store across from the Parish News on the right across the street there, the Parish News there next to the post office.
Aren't they one of the first families that, like, they even have head rights to Lamar County? Haven't they been here for?
She owned it for a good many years.
Many years. They owned it till they died. And then the Ridley girl came back and lived with Miss Linda after she got sick and lived here for a good year. Her daddy was president of the American National Bank. Miss Kitty Keel, back there at the big house, worked for a number of years. And Hugh Tennant, they said, was in the grocery business. And he and his 2 sons would go out and play golf, and all of them would turn in a 36 score. Shoot par golf the whole round. And then Lee and Hammond lived down in the next block past us, and I think he and his brother and dad would do just about as well.
Trying to see
That was on that other street.
the engraving.
This was called 27th in 1929.
Is this the? Tell me about the Jenkins. What was the relative that lived in y'all's house? That is this Hugo, or this may be somebody different though, engraved
I
on the
think
top of it.
that's the number of the street.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that other one down there had it on it too. I couldn't figure out what it said.
Yeah, they had the street numbers there way back.
You said this was what street?
This was North 27th Street.
This was still, this was labeled East Cherry.
This is East.
That's right. It sure was.
I can't tell what it is.
Well, this is East Pole. This is East Cherry. This is East Cherry. Called Doc Caldwell had the biggest jewelry store from Dallas, Muskogee to Tulsa. And he had beautiful, sterling silver tea and coffee servers. You could buy them $300 to $500, $1,200, $1,500. As pretty as you get in Dallas. And he lived here for a number of years. And my daddy, in his house, started out here, both cobblestone house in the front, and there were a brown shingle house when shingles first came in as a popular house. So that was built in the 20s. And then later on, Lee Yancey was tax collector's assessor. He bought this and moved in with his daughter there and lived there a long time. Then Marcus Walker, that used to run the kitchen across from Randy's out there for Winnow Butte, he lived there for a while. And Melba Stale, I think, lives there now. Her husband died here not too long ago. And the next house was usually a rent house, and different people moved in and out here. And Broad Acres was one on the corner up here. He was a big insurance man. That beautiful house. Etta Mallison and her mother was one of the best Bible scholars that we had. Ms. Mallison and Ms. T.D. Wells were top Bible teachers and really knew that Bible from cover to cover. Let's see. Then the White sisters lived the new house that the church has fixed up.
Shall we cross over and go back that way?
Yeah. There's somebody got.
Is that Normandy Broad?
Yeah.
While we're here, can you tell about that house in the corner that's that rock house and where they got the...
Yeah, the rock house on the corner of 8th Street and Pine Bluff. He built the courthouse out of red granite, and he had all those scraps left. So he took the scraps and built that house with the marble and the scrap granites that he had from the courthouse and got a free house out of the deal. And it was a very pretty house until somebody took the marble off of the railings around the porch and all, and then it started running down, and it doesn't look very good now. But you sure do grow pretty flowers in the front yard.
There were Aikens that lived there.
Aikens?
There's one who had 10 boys.
This is where Hugh Tennant lived right here. When the White sisters live here, it's been vacant for some time. It got run down pretty good, so the church moved here, and they bought that for the upstairs. It's fixed up for the appointment for the pastor that just comes here on the weekend, and redid the whole house, put new plumbing in everything, wall-to-wall carpeting, made it just improved. Fitzhugh quite a bit. Fixed that house. In fact, some of us gave him a little money to help him along. We were so pleased to see it fixed up so nice.
The White sisters picked up Susie Blair and took her to work every morning at the belts.
Yeah.
One of the sisters did that.
Yeah, one of the sisters worked there too. And they were sweet people.
Yes, they were.
And they loved kids. And they had a big screened-in porch out here. And we'd play 42 on our work down here, they hard to. Sometimes it makes much noise, you couldn't hear which one was which. And where we lived, later on, Dixon Shelters lived there. And they were big 42 players too. I mean.
Where is your house?
Where we started from.
I mean, the one you grew up in, Dad's house.
Just next to you.
Dad's
Just
house,
south.
this side of
It was pretty south on the street at that time. And then the Osmonds across the street, he was a Ford Lincoln agent. When they were selling a lot of Model T Fords. I remember the last one my daddy got it was a 4-door Model T Ford. First one that had bumpers on it. Had to put those on extra, and the wooden steering wheels are torn up here instead of down here. And it was $850 cash with everything.
With everything.
With everything on it. You could have any color you wanted as long as you wanted black. And Ben Holloman lived here at first. His wife's mother and dad lived here, Mr. and Miss Hudson. And he was with Hood Rubber Company. He kept me supplied with free tennis shoes all the time I was growing up before he moved to Dallas and went into their home office there. And Ben moved off, one of my best friends. He was a couple years younger than I. And her sister was one that married Clark, who was president of Roger Wade's lumber company, and gave Camp Clark to the Boy Scouts that I got to enjoy when I was a scout out where what's Travis? Is it Travis Avenue? The Travis School out there where the Clarks, I think, was.
Then did Miss Dunnigan buy it after that? Did Dunnigans buy it after that?
Where? Right here. Yes. Oscar Dunnigan.
Oscar Dunnigan.
Had this house, and there's none of who lives there now. I think it's house. But the Hudsons had a bunch of fine. All of them turned out to be just real fine ladies. I don't have my glasses. I can't see where I'm going. And then the president of Paris Milling Company, Bob Parker, lived here. Before he got here. Now this used to be a real pretty house. It had white bricks, columns all across the roof, great big porch. You couldn't change that like anything. Pretty house at one time. But he lived right here. And then Mr. Alden the next place, Dr. Goolsby the next place. And
You know the year that, do you remember the year that Sean's bought this one?
No, but the year it was built would be about 1925, 26 along there. And they lived there for a number of years. And after, well, I don't remember just when Lord got it before I came back. And then the Presbyterians bought that as a Presbyterian man. And then Church of Christ, Thelma Castleberry's daddy was Church of Christ, and he lived here when I was in the service. He was supposed to be in his Deshaun's garden. It was a pretty place, and it poured down cats and dogs. So Miss Fry said we just have all the neighbors come over and eat on my screen porch. They have 4 big rooms downstairs, and we all moved in and went right on the party like that anyway.
Whose house was this one again?
This was J.E. Osborne, and he owned the Ford and the Lincoln, and he sold out just before the '29 crash. And right after there, the next fellow who bought it, he didn't order 10 Fords every 2 weeks, but they sent him 10 Fords every 2 weeks.
Oh, the pastor of the church up there wants those cars moved. That's whoever, if any of y'all's car parked up there with the church, they're gonna have church at 7:30. Well, it's 7:30 now.
I think
Park them way over on the other side over there.
Yeah, they'd call up about every 2 weeks and tell the Ford agents they had 10 Fords that they shipped in from Dallas. As a matter of fact, if Dad didn't have a room to store them over there, and he'd have to go pick them up. And when he picked them up, then he had to send them a down payment on all those Fords. And Mr. Alderman sure was glad that he'd got rid of that the year before at a big price. And so he opened up a stock brokerage, Merrill Lynch, Pierce, and Denny Beam down at the Gibraltar Hotel. And lost part of his money there playing it himself, I think.
Now, who lived here?
Dr. E. Goolsby.
Oh.
He was surgeon, OB. He was the First Baptist Church. We had Christine Goolsby, who was a school teacher at the college and different places. She went to Ward Belmont in the University of Texas. Hello, kitty cat. You remember?
Following us.
Okay, maybe that's a rabbit.
She later married Mr. Deshaun.
And then she later married Mr. Deshaun. Then Mr. Deshaun's mother and daddy lived down the street. And old maid's sister, Miss Virginia. Now this was Dr. Cook. He was my dog and cat doctor. And he had a little hospital in behind there, and he'd take care of them from where we go. And it's falling down. Hadn't been nobody lived in it since she died. That was 155, I guess. Well, it's changed number. That was North 27th, 155, North 27th. And it was a pretty house, but just recently the storm hit that, knocked the porch in.
Does anyone live here now?
No, they
They haven't lived there since the daughter died, right? Did you say?
Well, no. They didn't have any children here. She had a child when he was with them. And he was pretty bad. I thought a high school had a dance school there called the dance. And this house, I've forgotten the first one that lived here. I think it might have been Mr. Humphrey. But I know later, Pete Humphrey lived here. Pete Humphrey lived here for a while. He had the biggest grocery store, I guess, in Lamar County.
Who was this house I missed?
Dr. Cook,
Veterinarian.
F.G. Cook, veterinarian,
Okay.
small animal veterinarian.
When did the Prices buy this?
It's later on.
Later on.
And of course, Price became a pretty good insurance.
Yeah, I
agent
understand
here.
that he was one of the first that really tuned in to the value of insuring automobiles.
Yeah.
Apparently made old man Charlie Price apparently made some pretty good money
Yeah, he did real good.
insuring cars.
And Charlie's been sick for a while, but he's doing a little better now.
Come at
His boy, his son.
Junior.
Yeah, Junior.
Bill, they could go by Bill Price.
Price. Yeah. And, but it was a real pretty house. And when Pete Humphrey had it, he had a little screened-in porch, and they'd go out the back. Didn't have DDT to keep mosquitoes down then, and they'd go out there and they could have their picnic without having any mosquito bites.
This is 29.
And so Charlie's lived here a good while now. He took it over when his daddy died, or when he moved in there. And then across the street next to me is Colonel Haygood's house. That was D.J. Kennedy's house, who was I guess the first master plumber in Paris back in the World War I era. And he put a hot water heater in our original house, and I think it lasted 52 years before we had to get another. So he did a real job.
You're talking about that house?
This
there?
house right here. Now it had red bricks across the front, post across it. Tommy, it was big and messed up his walls, so he tore it down and put the wood in it, which I like to say anyway. Now, during the war, Lloyd Deshaun bought that and made a duplex out of it. A few years had it paid for, just from the rent he got for it. And then he sold it for a big price after the war, so he came out real good on that. But D.J. Kennedy was, as old boy said, he's one real honest plumber. And he was a good one. And his secretary built this cute little house here, and they just fixing it up now. She's been dead sometime. Just didn't want to sell it. But it's a cute little house. And that was his secretary for years. She started running the business. And then the Bills lived next door here, now where to move. Tell who all lived in your house.
Well, before 1947, Fayette Riddell lived here and bought this, and then we bought it from Fayette Riddell in 1947. This was a Lynn Haynes, their family. And then we lived there from 1947 to 1967. And Fayette Riddell then bought that rock house out on Highway 79.
In this next house to this one, Mr. Griner lived there. He was a contractor. And he built a lot of houses when I was a little boy. And he lived there now. What's in Brunson. Mr. Brunson then bought it. He had a big farm down on the river. He'd take my boys down fishing and hunting on the river and everything. And boy, they thought he was the greatest neighbor that Fitzhugh offered.
Plus, he was school superintendent, wasn't he?
Yeah. And he was good, fine fellow. Didn't mind your kids spending all day, all weekend with, either go for hay, but we go see what they did. Here's Billington now. And then Miss Carter lives in this next house. Now that's where Mrs. Lloyd DeShawn's mother and Miss Virginia Hicks live. And Ms. Roundtree lived in this house here. Later, Mr. Harlan, the president of Lamar Creamery, bought that house, fixed it up real nice. And then he bought the Simpson place on the corner here. That was the other house besides the Sharp place, the only two houses that didn't burn in the Paris fire. And Mrs. Carter, what you do, real estate?
Have they been there?
For a good while, but not a long time.
forever, I
Not
don't
forever.
I wonder if those might have come off some of the fire damage.
No, I don't think so. And Mr. Upton lived right here. He lost his wife and his daughter lived there. Mr. Holden. And the Holden kids grew up there, and then the Holden girl married Judge Bill Thompson. And they lived in the house on the corner there. His Carter's in the hospital. She's in the heritage home right now. Now these trees are the ones that didn't burn during the Paris fire. And this one broke off right here. Look at that limb. It went all the way across the street and knocked down all the power line on that side. At 1:10, the hottest night of the summer, a couple of years ago. My son and his wife, the air conditioner went out the day before. He called over and asked, "Can we spend the night with you? We don't have the air conditioner." He said it'd be next Tuesday before they could get one. And that tree broke, and it was a big, it was this big around. And it went across and broke all those power lines. Tommy came in and said, "Daddy," he said, "you got a flashlight?" I said, "Yeah, I got one in my pocket here. Why?" He said, "The lights went out and I was reading a novel and just got right in this place and I can't see. I want to check the fuse box." Well, I looked out and saw all the street lights and everything. I said, "No, you should be checking. Everybody's lights out." So by 45 minutes, he called. He's working city judge, so he called the police and they said, "Yes, we already have the TPNL out there." 45 minutes didn't wake up anybody except They were so quiet and all they got that. And that thing was huge, but it had a big hole they go down there. Now Mr. Harlan lived here and fixed that up real nice. And then when the Simpsons sold him this big, this is a double lot. This is where he played ball right here, baseball. And the druggist's wife lived here with the snow white hair. And that was my first love. She was 29 and I was 11. And she didn't have any kids. And her husband was a druggist. I don't think he was trying to get my daddy to send the drug business to him. But she'd have cookies and lemonade every time we'd finish our ball game. She'd call us over to have cookies and lemonade. That's when we had to squeeze the lemon. You didn't open the can. And she died when I was a senior in medical school. And I found out that she had cancer of the ovary. And that's the reason she couldn't have any children. So all of our little boys on Fitzhugh were her little boys. And she was so sweet to us. I always loved that. And that was my first sweetheart. My second sweetheart, I married her. Irene. And she's a honey. So Mr. Harlan moved over here and built this lovely home.
It was
And
really nice.
after when his first wife died, and then he married his second wife, she and he built this.
Now, what house was here before this house was built?
This was Wood's house right here. This had Wood's house right here.
Okay.
And it had a lot of fancy
right on this limb,
colored
right?
stained glass windows upstairs.
Okay.
And then all the houses along from here to the big house, next big house there was about 3 houses, and all of them had basements and furniture there. And we'd get in the rainy days, we'd get in and play like we'd on top of a boat on the 3rd floor and 4th floor shark place. Take our spyglasses, you know, and toy fish and look out there and we see the enemy coming. We had a good place to play when it slid on around.
Were these houses burned in the fire? You're
All
talking about to have the basements?
Yes, all the next, there was 3 basements and where the Hammond, Stephen Hammond, Daddy built this house for him. And they violated everything that basically was thought not to do, but he had them to do it in his house. All the things are crooked and out of line, nothing jive.
It's burned about 3 times.
Yeah. But he was a good jobber. He and his brother and his dad, they were back in the 10s, they'd go out and he would turn about 336s out to the dock there. Yeah, Judge Thompson lived there. His wife, Holden girl, she's still there.
Wasn't that the Holden? Isn't that where she grew
That's
up?
good. Well, she grew up in the nest house there with Mr. Upson. He had an apartment. They had an apartment. He was.
And now, when I lived here, she actually lived. She and Mr. Holden both lived here.
When
They
I was
grew,
in high
yeah,
school.
they grew. The children grew up in this big house.
Yeah.
Because all red or something.
All the bankers lived in that house
Yeah,
too.
all red. All red.
So Richard did shoe shine. He'd come down and shine his shoes. He'd get in the price. He said, anything you want to give him. And he'd always give him 4 or 5 times as much as the shoe shine was worth, you know, and tip him $1. So he'd go shine his shoes every 2 or 3 days. He'd go down. All bright.
All bright.
All
That's
bright.
it. And it was all something.
Who lives in this house now?
I don't know who lives there now. That's the one that lived in Hammond. They
Yes.
built him. He built John Hammond where Roy Miller Wells lived.
Yes.
Lovely home. But they had 2 different kind of wives.
Yeah.
2 boys. But this see, all the bricks are big and bad. Let's go across over here on the sidewalk to walk across here. Lived here, and I don't know who lives there now.
Now, you weren't planning to go down to the big house, were you?
Yeah, we could.
The reason I was going to ask you a question about that,
All right.
I'm interested in the history of the Dent Theater chain. It was the chain that formed
yeah.
later Interstate Theaters.
Yeah. Pretty well.
The Dent family was from Paris. A guy named Louis L. Dent. And there was apparently a daughter or a wife or something that lived for a brief time in the big Atkinson house.
They
down
bought that place.
Okay, can you tell me about that family and who they are and what happened to them?
No, I don't know about that then.
Their daughter, they had a daughter.
Arietta was
Dang.
one of them,
Okay,
A-R-I-E.
They had another daughter, Becky, that married Max Swain. They were married, Swain Printing Company?
Yes.
They were married a short while. That would have been in the 60s.
Then they had one Daniel Dent that married Barnes Smith.
Across the Pride.
This Mike Smith.
TPNA.
Because I taught Daniel.
Vice officer of TPNL used to always live here. They'd save it for him. He would live here. Different ones, I guess, they would come in and have a place for him to stay.
Who's living there now, Tom?
I don't know. I don't know who lives here. Mr. Bond lived over here, the first house, and he was a policeman, and he ended up as a prison guard. And he took me through the penitentiary one time. He had a boy older than that. They could sure older.
12.
Well, but let me butt in just a minute.
Okay.
Ms. Dent bought this place after the war. They made, I know, 15 apartments or so out of this house, and put cheap linoleum all over the fine inlaid. It had the most beautiful inlaid floors you've ever seen, and they didn't stain the wood. The woods were that natural color, you know, black and browns and all different colors. And they were put together so when you walk over, it didn't crack or give, and you know, just really well done. And this house was built with every chimney had to be higher than the highest point of the roof. Yeah. When you get back up here and you see, watch that snow. And, well, you can't see it, but it's good. We used to have a big wrought iron fence all around it here. And this fellow that has the horse carriage is just recently born it. He tore down the fence here. We got to keep the horse out here. But this is a beautiful home. The Atkinson built it about the turn of the century. And then
He was the shoe. He ran a shoe company, didn't he?
I don't know. He was pretty well to do. I didn't know.
Okay.
But he built about the turn of the century. And it's pretty big. It's got these cupola windows, these round curved windows. I know somebody lived there. It was near shop. And it broke one. It broke off for several hundreds of dollars. Just put a piece of plexiglass there and had them molded around these curved windows here.
I've been in that house.
And before, when they made the apartments out of it, they put cheap linoleum on all the floors.
Yeah. Was that during the war?
That was during the war. And they made a mint of money off renting all these apartments because they'd pay anything for a 3 or 4 room apartment then. And then a whole bunch of people lived there. And Miss Dent came back and she said, the first thing, we've got to get up all this worn out old cheap linoleum. We poured that up and this beautiful, you know, as pretty as her thing, it stood out like that before it had been preserved with that cheap linoleum. And then Miss Sharp had that refinish, and it looked just beautiful for years. The Sharps were down on the river.
Well, did the old man Dent, didn't he die or something early on?
I don't know. They had a lot of money from the theaters, didn't they?
Yes.
And that's where they got the money to buy the place, from what my understanding.
Because old man Dent had 20 or 25 theaters all over Texas.
And Dr. Morris lived here. He was a dentist, and he'd married and had some older kids that were grown, and then he had David, my age, which was my age, the second wife. And then this was a big lot here. We played football and stuff on it. He kept it mowed, except it had sandburrs on it, so we'd rather play over the Simpsons place than didn't have sandburrs. But then later on, they put in put golfing. They put a real nice golfing course in here, and we go out and practice in the morning. And work through things, and we shoot a hole-in-one, and get a hole-in-one, you get a free picture show pass. So we go out and play a dime to play a game of golf, and we come back with a 25-cent coupon to go to the picture show that afternoon. It just cost us a dime. That's where we got to see all the shows. This was a beautiful place when I was a little boy. A lot of room, and all those chimneys had double-back fireplaces on first, second, and third floor. And I don't know how they got the smoke all go up to different ones. But see how high they are? Well, when the tornado hit, it totaled Jimmy Johnson's house, which is right there. Totaled it. Told Lawrence's, Lawyer Lawrence built that before he moved down to East Texas. It totaled it. It totaled the back of this house that they took off and moved it back there for a rent house to support his wife after he retired from dentistry. And she built a glass shelf in the middle of the house and had glass shelves and had all her cut glass tile china and stuff, cut glass work, and she got his wedding present in 1916, 17, and that was a popular thing to give then for a wedding present. Instead of silver, you gave cut glass. This real cut glass that they make her quit making because so many people get in the lungs and kill them. And it tore that whole house down, except for that cabinet with all these sliding doors, glass doors, lights coming out there. It stayed out there with nothing that for 2 weeks, and nobody stole any, none of it got broken. And she was going to move to California, and because those are all her wedding gifts and everything, she was going to ship all those with her wicker furniture and stuff that was not worth shipping, but the daughter couldn't talk her out of it. The storm took the whole house away. They paid her complete coverage for all her furniture, all her house, and the only thing she had of value was these cut glass. She shipped those. 3 months later, she was going to stay another 6 months, but she made it short and left and shipped that.
Now that was the house behind
That's
this
the
one?
house behind it, the house here, and the house here were totaled. And all they did to this house, it blew all those chimneys off. And they'd been there since 1900. So I'm sure it was nothing but sand between them. It blew all the chimneys off. And see all these snakes coming out at the top there? It didn't blow one of those off. They were all intact. It was a well-built house, I'd say. No. Well, I think it was well further back.
Okay.
And then Earl White's dad lived next to Mr. and Mrs. White. They moved to California, the next house. And then the Haygood house was the next house. And Tom, Dad and Mother bought that. That's a Seacrest house.
Is that the blue one?
That's the blue one. And then next to them was Hodge's shoe store. I leave a pair of shoes there, and boy, they fixed the whole sole or half sole, something like that on a pair of shoes. And they were delivered on the way home. I'd pay them for them, and they just leave them at the front door and go on, you know. That was the best shoe store, best shoe cover that I ever had.
Who lives here now?
This fellow that has a white horse for weddings and things, you know, what's his name?
Nails.
Yeah, he just recently bought it.
Because remember his house was sold to one of the makers, women shelter. Yeah, it
William
had
Shepard.
the women shelter.
Y'all want to walk on down the street, or you want to get telephone back to me?
Why don't you just tell them?
Yeah, we
The next one is, this was a lawyer, the next one was Spurgeon. They were both lawyers. And then Alexander, the brother of the two ones that had Alexander Bookstore, and Miss Golden Alexander was the artist. They lived in a big two-story house. And that's the one that Leland Smith had as president of the Texas Power and Light. And his wife was in the upstairs when the tornado hit. A great big tree trunk came through the roof and sat down right by her. Didn't hurt her, didn't break the furniture up, just came down through just the whole roof, bang, just like that. But that was nerve-wracking. And I've forgotten who they were there now. Next one was Chester. Mr. Chester had a grocery store in Blossom, moved up here. Sarah Helen Chester's dad and mother. And next to them was Ross Olive. He was a Buick dealer. And he and his wife separated, and she married Mr. Mann, and she kept the house there, the brick house. Then Plug Clem down on the end house. The Clems lived down there. He was a lawyer. And across the street was J.W. Harrison's daddy. Barney Harrison was the second generation of Harrisons. And then J.W. his daddy was the second, and J.W. Harrison was the third. Now Harper's, his stepson, is fourth generation in that building firm. And where the Chesters lived, there was an architect that lived there, Mr. Berry, that drew a lot of the homes for Paris and all the architecture.
W.G. Berry.
Yeah. And
Which house was a Stubblefield house? It says Stubblefield. you remember which house that was?
No, I'd have to
That
look
was
at
right before Grove, so it was on this end or that end.
Stubblefield.
East.
Alexander, of course, she was an artist, was a brother to the two ones that had the bookstore, and then her brother had this one. And one of the Alexander, I guess he lived in, he might have lived where the